Welcome back to Real House DIY. Today I'm getting ready to tile this mudroom. Now if you haven't already checked it out, I've got a playlist, every single step of the process, preparing the subfloor, installing the Ditra Heat Membrane, testing out the cables, installing the cables, and now it's time to install the tile. Now don't forget, before installing a tile, you're going to want to use your multimeter and your insulation resistance tester. Check out the cables one last time and record those measurements, not only for the warranty, but it's to make sure the heat is actually going to work after you've done the tiling. Now you might have noticed I have this large mat here. This is the front door of the house. Still have people coming in and out, so want some protection for those cables before you get to the tile installation. A lot of this is going to be the same process installing any tile floor. I have some levels here. I'll be checking for level as I'm installing tiles. Also checking tile to tile, make sure those are at the same height. I have some basic tile spacers. I'm doing 1/8 inch gap with 1/4 inch around the perimeter. I have plenty of the 50-pound bags of Schluter All-Set. This is the thin set mortar they can use for any part of the installation, below the membrane, on top of the membrane for the tile install. I've got the 5-gallon bucket, and this will fit the 50-pound bag with water mixed in the thin set. However, typically just mix half bag at a time. This right here is half a bag, 25 pounds. I'm using a bathroom scale to check for the measurements on that, so that the consistency will be exactly the same, measuring the amount of water per 25 pounds. Got the drill with the mixing paddle as well as a charger and an extra battery. Found you quickly use up an entire battery, especially these ones if they're just the 1.5 amp hour batteries. So you want to be able to just keep those charging, especially if you're going to be going through 3 or 4 bags of thin set and want to just keep installing tile. Got a sponge and a bucket for water. Want to be cleaning thin set off the tile as you go. I have large format tile, so I'm going to be using the 1/2 inch notch trowel. And I also have a pointed trowel. And then instead of drawing grid lines, I'm using the vertical laser on this laser level, especially for the first few rows, to make sure I get them straight before I continue in that direction. And all the straight edges, that's great for checking the level and flatness tile to tile. But if you need to tap on any tiles, you're going to want something like this rubber float, some of the soft surface. And so tapping on a tile like that will protect the surface, get it to lay a little flatter, get some air bubbles out. A couple other tools you might want to use. The knee pads, I don't usually wear these. The attachments for your legs, a little bit too restricting for me. Got a bucket filled out with hot water. So in between mixing thin set, you're gonna be soaking your tools, keeping them clean. This margin float, this really comes in handy, cleaning off the edge of the tiles. I also use it to knock down the ridge right along the edge of tiles. And that'll help keep thin set from squeezing up between the edge of 2 tiles. And I've got this tuck point trowel. Of course, this is gonna be used for brickwork, but this really comes in handy if you need to clean out any thin set between 2 tiles or at the edge of the wall. This is really thin, it will get right in between those tight gaps. And also while using your notch trowel, if that notch gets perfect except for one little spot, you can use this, scoop a tiny bit of thin set, fill in that one spot. You don't have to run the notch trowel through again. These soft rubber tile spacers, these are really nice to use. I've always used them for my floor tile projects. And this one here, this is 1/8 inch, and it's 1/8 inch in that dimension as well as that dimension. So I like to use a couple of these against the wall, get a 1/4 inch away from the wall, and you stack it like that. Or between 2 tiles, put them between the 2 tiles just like that. And you have the added benefit where you can see if there's any tile lippage between 2 tiles without the need for a tile leveling system. The tile leveling system, you definitely want to get that for like a large format wall tile, but you can get by with this just fine for a floor tile project. Now if you've seen the earlier video, I already dry fit and cut all the tiles in advance. So that will allow me to just keep working on the tile install and not worry about going and cutting tile. However, when you do that, you have to adhere to order of installation of tile. Specifically, I'm going to want to make sure that I get this piece fit in first, where I want a specific gap where I'm transitioning to the hardwood floor. And I want the first row straight with the front door here. So I'm going to be installing this piece here at the threshold area, as well as the first 2 rows completely in order first. So the rows closest to the door will be finished first, and then I'll switch to tiling over at the far corner, working my way back here. And also, as you can see with this first piece in place, you can see that this one, it's going to dictate how much thin set I use in order to get up to the level of the existing hardwood floor right there. So getting this piece in first with just the right amount of thin set to reach that level, and that's going to help tell me at which angle I need to hold my notch trowel to get just the right amount of thin set. And I'll follow with that same amount of thin set throughout the rest of the floor. To get an idea of how much thin set I need to apply to get the tile up to the exact height of this hardwood floor, I'm going to get a measurement here. It's about 1/4 inch. I'm using my 1/2 inch notch trowel, so after I get the flat layer filling up the membrane, and I'm using the notch side, I'm going to want to hold this at almost a 90-degree angle. And then what happens, I'll get that full 1/2 inch height here, and then when the tile gets pressed down, it's going to fill in the gaps, and it's going to get down to 1/4 inch. Now let's say you didn't need to get a full 1/4 inch here, maybe you only need an 1/8 inch or so. That's when you can go and put an angle when you're putting your notches in, and then you can fine tune it. That'll apply a little bit less thin set. So using your notch trowel at full 90-degree angle, that's going to give you the most thin set applied, versus a 45-degree angle that's going to be at about half as much. I've seen some people ask the question, can you fill in with thin set all the studs of the membrane and get a flat layer, then come back a few days later to install a tile floor? You could do that, but it's really not buying you anything. It's a lot easier just to fill this in flat and then go with the notch trowel and then install your tile. I think the only case where someone might want to do it the other way, let's say your tile hasn't been delivered yet, and then you have exposed cables here, and this is a house build in progress, so a lot of contractors walking across the floor, and you don't want to damage the wires. But otherwise, in my case, you saw that was a really easy solution. Just have that large floor mat. You can walk across it easily. There's no damage to the wires. I did the test on the cables after. It was just fine. And a little more prep before you start tiling. I've already vacuumed the floor, and you can see if you have any areas like this where you had thin set up above the top layer of the membrane, you want to make sure you have that cleaned off. If it's down below the top layer, that's fine to leave that in place. But you want that nice, smooth, flat top surface of these studs. And that will ensure the thin set for your tile is going to go on nice and flat and smooth. Also, you really want to maintain the gap along the outer perimeter of your uncoupling membrane. You can see the spot over here where you see some white remnant from thin set. I ended up just chiseling that thin set out. It had dried and was stuck between the membrane and the wall. If you don't maintain that gap, then you're going to defeat the purpose of the uncoupling membrane. You need the subfloor and the wall to be able to move independently from your tile. So if this is all locked in with thin set, that's not going to work. So maintaining this gap, that's important. You'll have less chance of breaking tile or grout in the future. Then finally, part of the dry layout for the tile flooring, I numbered each of these tiles in the order that I want them installed. So for installing these first 2 rows, I've got those first 2 rows stacked here in order that I need to install them. These first few will be the first ones to install. And then each of the 2 rows I've separated right here in order that I need to install them. And then finishing with these 2 cut pieces for the ends of these 2 rows. So I'll finish installing those first 2 rows here. Then all the rest of the tile for the last 2 rows I've stacked right outside the room. So with everything I need prepped and prepared, all the pieces cut in advance, I can focus on the installation and getting this perfectly level and flat. Over here at the front door, I have this metal sill pan here. I did need to press that in, get that back to almost 90 degrees, because over time, before starting the installation of the tile floor, still using this as a front door, people going in and out, and people are stepping on this threshold, and it was bending over this metal sill pan. So if you have a sill pan at any doorways, you want those to be pressed back to 90 degrees. So now I can get my tile spaced that 1/4 inch away and not too close to that. Because this edge here, that won't get filled in with grout after, that's going to get caulking. When you're mixing this all set for tile, it is thicker than it calls for when you're installing the membrane. So when you're mixing this for the membrane, it's a little bit looser, and your drill can definitely handle mixing a full bag at a time. This I mixed a 1/2 bag. It's really bogging down the 1/2 inch drill. So definitely don't mix more than a 1/2 bag at a time unless you have a really powerful drill. So you can just scoop out thin set like I'm doing here or you can kind of pour it out of the bucket. Here's my first tile that's going to go in. So you can get the thin set right up to where you need it. That's not quite thick enough for my 1/2 inch. First I got it all nice and flat, going multiple directions, filled up all the voids in the membrane. I gotta get this a little bit thicker so I can get my 1/2 inch notch with the trowel. Then always going to back butter the tile. What it does is it fills any of the voids on the bottom side of the tile, and it will ensure that thin set is actually going to be applied everywhere on the tile, and that will be easy, thin set against thin set, to ensure you get the proper install without missing any spots. And this you can scrape completely thin. Bring the tile in, wiggle it. As you go, if you get any thin set on top of the tile, you can use your sponge, clean that off right away. You might remember from my dry tile layout video, I made a reference mark there for where my first grout line is going to be. At this point, I'm going to set up my laser. Get a vertical line straight down. I'll measure it against the wall here and down there. That'll make sure I'm parallel with this tile row all the way along the wall. I'll have to raise it up a little bit on a box. That way I'll be able to see the line on the floor. I get that set perfectly. Get that laser right on the grout line. I'll be able to see that all the way down as I'm installing this row of tile. This particular tile that I got has an uneven surface texture, so I'm checking for level and flatness. You know, right here, it appears that there's a gap there, but there's actually not. It's level and flat across to most of the tile over here. And yeah, I can feel that there's a dip down on that part of the tile right there. Yeah, it's nice and flat here and on the other side. So the texture of this tile works a little bit to my advantage, where if I don't have it exactly perfect, you know, it's designed to look like that. Now I've reached pretty much the end of my first 25 pounds of thin set mix. What I'm gonna do, I'm gonna use up every last bit of this that's in the bucket before I clean the bucket off and mix some more. And what I'll do, I'll use that. It's not quite enough to put another full tile down. I'll use it to fill in the voids in the membrane for the next one. I'll also clean up any edges I have down here. At least it looks pretty good. It looks like it's all below that level, that top level of the membrane. Yeah, that's fine. On the tiles, I did want to check the coverage on it. This worked really well. Grip underneath to lift the tile up. Just did the first mix on my next batch of thin set. During this 10-minute wait time before we mix again, that's perfect time to get a sponge, clean up your tiles, check again for any level or flatness, orientation of your tiles. Also a good time to get your tools clean and ready for the next set of tiles going down. I've reached the end of my first row here. At this point, I don't need that laser line. I can just check 16 inches, so it's parallel with the wall. Then all the rest of my rows will be parallel. Definitely saving a lot of time doing the dry layout ahead of time. Don't have to worry about cutting these. Fits in perfectly. Still, as I go, checking for level and flatness. Checking both directions, especially now going more rows in this direction. I want to make sure that I'm staying level. As you're filling in the studs on the membrane, definitely use your flat trowel in every direction to get those full. As you're wiggling the tile in, you can sometimes hear the air escaping. You do want to be careful setting these small pieces. It's very easy to put too much pressure on the small piece and a lot of this thin set will squeeze out. So just lightly wiggle, get down to the same height as the tile next to it. So it's a couple days later, we're back, tile's finished. There really wasn't much else to show for these remaining 2 rows that I tiled, other than not having as much space to work with. It took me a good full day to finish tiling this entire room. Each 25 pounds of thin set that I mixed was enough with a 1/2 inch trowel to lay down 4 to 5 tiles. These are 16 by 24 tiles. So I think I ended up mixing thin set about 7 times. And that time really adds up. The mixing, the wait time and mix again for the thin set adds up to 18 minutes. Keeping the tools clean in between easily adds another 20 minutes. And then each time laying the tiles down, 1/2 hour to an hour. So adding all that up, tiling this one room by myself, somewhere between 6 and 8 hours. Now the thin set that I use, the Schluter All-Set, and it's the same for most other thin sets. You can grout 12 hours after installing the tiles, and really they make it that way specifically for the tile contractors, so you can finish tiling at the end of the day, come back in the morning and do the grout. And after that 12 hours, it's supposedly about 80% strength. And then you have to wait an entire month to get that full cure. A couple other things to point out. Here we have the conduit from the wall with the wires going down underneath the tile there. Still have barely an 1/8 inch clearance between the tile and the conduit. And then plenty of clearance for the wires. And you can see that hole there. That'll be covered up just fine by the baseboard. When you get down to installing these last few tiles, obviously you run out of room to put the extra thin set. So you are going to be spending a little bit of time scooping up extra thin set as you get that notched in just right. That extra thin set, put back in the bucket. Then whatever you have left over, scoop that out, put it in the trash. And more than likely you'll have a few spots where the thin set did not get to the corner of the tile. And you want to be really careful before you do the grout. If you put a lot of weight on this corner right here, that could break off if it's not supported by thin set underneath. So the solution for that, while you're grouting, you just keep packing the grout in. It will fill in that space underneath and help support it just fine. Then you'll probably have a few spots like this where your thin set gets smushed out of the bottom of the tile, went right up against the wall. Obviously that's best if you can scoop that out right away before it dries. Here I just let it dry and you can tell from some of these marks. I used an awl, you can also use a flathead screwdriver and just break off that thin set right where it is up against the wall. Because you still want to maintain that gap between the tile floor and the rest of the structure. And you want that to move independently from the tile floor Otherwise, you're defeating the purpose of the uncoupling membrane. Now that the tile is protecting those heating cables, you can go ahead, do your measurements on the wires again, the heating cable and the temperature sensors. I did those tests and the results are all still good, even after doing plenty of scraping along those wires with the trowel. So now all we have left to do for this tile floor is the grout. Then after 7 days and after the thermostat is installed, we can turn on that floor heat.